In the tapestry of life, where every thread holds a story, America in black and white emerges as a haven for the voices echoing through the heart of our communities. In this podcast, we wade through the rivers of our collective experiences, celebrating the vibrant hues of change brought forth by the whispers of hope and the roars of action. It's more than just a conversation. It's a journey into the heart of our society, illuminated by the light of those daring to dream and do. Join us, and let your voice be the melody that guides us toward a dawn where every color finds its place in the masterpiece of our shared destiny. Together, let's paint a future brimming with the positives that dwell in our minds and the actions that shape our world.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of America in Black and White. I'm your host, Charles King, and I want to start by saying good evening, family. Welcome to another powerful episode of America in Black and White, where we explore the brilliance, resilience, and lived experiences of Black leaders shaping our nation's cultural, academic, and social landscapes. Tonight, we sit with a scholar whose journey reflects the very essence of Black excellence, rooted in community, sharpened by education, and elevated through service. From Montgomery, Alabama, a city that has long stood as a crossroads of pain, progress, and possibility, emerges a leader who embodies the transformative power of learning and leadership. A man who has dedicated his life to helping students discover their identity, cultivate their voice, and step boldly into their purpose. He is a higher education administrator, a DEI facilitator, an author, a consultant, a mentor, and a community servant. He is a builder of people, a cultivator of culture, and a champion of equity. Tonight, we welcome Dr. Wade Manora Jr., a visionary whose work continues to push forward the next generation of leaders. This conversation is not just about his accomplishments, it's about the journey, the calling, and the impact. Let's begin, and let's bring Dr. Wade Manora Jr. to the stage. Hello, sir.
Hello. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, sir, I can hear you. It sounds like you got a little thing going on, though. Okay. So, is there anything you'd like to say to the audience before we get into the show?
Yes, I'm just happy to be here. I really appreciate the space and opportunity to share with you all, and I look forward to an engaging conversation. And thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. So, what I like to do first is I like to go into the part where I like for the audience to get the opportunity to learn a little bit about who you are before you got to be Dr. Wade Manora Jr. Can you tell us, growing up in Montgomery, what early experiences shaped your identity and worldview?
I would have to say, so I'm a grandparent's baby. I definitely love my mother and my father. They poured a lot into me, but I will say one of my earliest memories growing up is just really being being around the north side of Montgomery, Alabama. My grandparents stayed in the Brookview, Shirley Heights area. And I just remember being around all my cousins and just really enjoying ourselves. But I can remember vividly my mom would sometimes pick me up from over there, sometimes my dad as well, and they would say, hey, you're going to be the greatest. Like those conversations going back home from my grandparents' home, that was like monumental because they would tell me like whatever was going on in the community, like you can help fix it, you can help solve it, you can be the best that you can be. They really poured into me because we stayed quite a bit of a distance away in my mind at the time from my grandparents, but the older I got, we was really about 25, 30 minutes away from them. So, but it felt like the longest drive. But to hear my parents specifically say, like, you can be the best that you can be, you can do whatever, you can achieve what it is, those were like the best conversations. And then also at the same time, my grandmother spent a lot of time with me too, and she would tell me as well, something special about you, you're going to do great. And she just poured into me, and I believed them. I believe that whatever they saw in me, I kind of just grabbed hold of that, and I made sure that that was the main thing for me every single day that I was around them.
Dr. Manora, before we get further into this, we got some folk that's actually putting some comments here in the chat already. You know, just some salutatory hellos or whatever have you. I just want to acknowledge them really quickly. I'll just put it on the screen. You know, I'm not sure exactly what your flag, what country your flag represents, but thank you for supporting. Then here's another one that she's in Brazil. Thank you for watching this show. And there's the Brazilian flag. I want to thank you. And somebody's asking why are we on YouTube and now on the news?
Hey, we're everywhere.
Okay. Uh, well, I want to thank them as well. How did your family influence your commitment to education and service?
So I would have to credit that to really my mom and my dad, but really my father. I can remember as early as kindergarten, first grade, he would every day that I had homework or an assignment or a project, I would sit at the bar stool and he would do and help me like learn like how do you do school. I would learn how to do math problems and reading. My parents read to me just about every single night to a certain point. And so they kind of made me kind of fall in love with the idea of getting an education in school, that it was really a safe place for me in that regard. But they also championed it. So if I did well on a quiz or a test or a homework assignment or anything simple all the way to my report cards, they made sure that that was a big deal. One of the biggest things my parents would do every 9 weeks when I got my report cards, we would simply go to Krispy Kreme and get those free donuts for every A that you receive. You got all A's and you got a dozen donuts. And so that was literally, I'm not going to lie, that was a goal that I had in my brain. I'm going to make sure I do the best I can on all of my quizzes and my tests and my homework, because I know I'm going to get a treat and be able to go to reward my family to get the Krispy Kreme full dozen donuts at the end of 9 weeks.
So, what does Montgomery mean to you today as both a birthplace and a historical landmark?
Actually, it meant a lot to me back then. Being a child of the 90s, we did a lot of field trips to like historical museums and mausoleums, and just like we was around the culture and understanding what it means to be a Black American in this country, what it means to be the cradle of the civil rights movement, driving past Rosa Parks' home, riding past the church of Reverend Dr. King, his church. So like being around that, I just always knew the importance of it. It's not until I got older and I left Montgomery, Alabama, that I really felt like a sense of pride in it, in the entire area, where it really meant something to me. And wherever I go, I champion my city and where I'm from, because I feel like there's an idea that nothing good could come from Montgomery, Alabama. And I want to make sure that, especially in today's time, that we're not just going to skip over my city as long as I'm alive. I want to make sure that I kind of represent and put on and make it known that I'm not born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia, where I did migrate to after I earned my master's degree. I'm not born and raised here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I'm from Montgomery, Alabama. And so all of my, when I go and speak to people, I make sure that they are aware and know that that's where I'm from and that's where I'm proud to be from. So it means a lot to me. And it means a lot to me for the simple fact that all of my family is from there and still there.
So, can you tell us, you know, as you stated earlier, and about what it taught you for visiting those field trips about being Black? Can you tell us, how do you feel being a Black man in America, but a Black man from Alabama, and doing the things that you're doing?
It made me realize that things had improved, but it was going to be up to me and my generation to make it even better. Unfortunately, I feel like we still have a long ways to go. I'm born and raised in 1991, and so things like the Rodney King abuse, that sort of thing, I didn't grow up necessarily seeing that or being aware that that was taking place in the country. So I grew up thinking that we were all pretty much on an even playing field, everything was good, that there was no real civil rights issues that was happening in real time. I also had an opportunity where I attended, I would say, a mixed elementary school and middle school, and not until I got to after middle school where I noticed that there was a huge disparity between access when it came down to Black Americans or Black communities in relation to our counterparts of white people or the affluent community, right? And so that kind of was shocking to me, but I would have to admit it kind of still didn't resonate 100% until I attended Auburn University, and I just happened to be growing up in a time where Trayvon Martin was murdered, and that was the moment where I was like, oh, I need to continue to kind of be abreast and aware of what's happening in the country in terms of race relations, because we're not where I thought we were, which made me even go even harder to make things better for my community, because I couldn't really rectify, nor people could justify it to me that someone that looks similar to me, we're not necessarily the same age, but we're close enough in age to where he could lose his life in that manner and no one has anything to say about it. So that did something to me as a Black man in this country, and that made me really just think about what could I do, what could I create, how could I give that, how could I empower others to refute the negative narratives, how could I empower others to build for ourselves at the same time. Is I think all of that came from my upbringing of being from Montgomery, Alabama, where I was aware of it, but at the same time, I grew up also, I would say, in the bubble of the 90s, where I was kind of raised to believe that we were kind of much further along than we were, but unfortunately that was not true as the older I got.
So when did you first realize you were called to leadership?
Ooh. So I've always been the outspoken one. I'm the one out of, I think it's either 15 or 16 grandchildren on my mom's side of the family. And so I was always kind of the one that would be kind of looked to kind of do the right thing or the moral thing. So I was always placed in that position. But I will have to say, as far as leadership goes, I can remember back in high school where I was tapped to be the president of the National Honor Society. And I was like, wow, that was a really big deal. And it's not something that I really asked for or championed for or lobbied for. Someone just saw something into me, and this person was the counselor of our school and was like, hey, well, I think you would be really good in this role. Not just because of your academic success, but because of your voice and how you position yourself. And I ran for it, and I was able to earn that position, and that kind of fueled me to want to continue to develop into a better leader even beyond my high school experience. But that's one of the earliest ones that I can really think of where I was really intentional about going towards leadership, opposed to before. People may put me in places before, but that was one where I was like, I really want to make a difference. And we did a lot of like community service projects, and we did like the tapping ceremony for new incoming National Honor Society students. So I really loved that experience. It kind of motivated me to chase even more opportunities.
So what challenges did you face as a first generation or continuing generation college student?
So I like how you phrase that, continuing generation. So I consider myself a hybrid first generation student. My father, Wade Manora Sr., God rest his soul, he passed away back in 2014, roughly like about 3 weeks to a month after I earned my bachelor's degree. And he actually was fortunate enough to attend Troy University back in the 80s. And, you know, his family structure was very of an interesting dynamic. His mother passed away when he was a teenager. And his father wasn't necessarily in the home or around, and so they were kind of shoveled around. But when I got into high school, my father went back to college and earned his bachelor's and his master's degree. But what's interesting about that, I was helping him do his work. So that's why I say I'm kind of like a hybrid first generation student. So a lot of things that I was able to help him achieve his goals, I had to turn around and help myself in terms of like applying for school, getting ready to apply for FAFSA and those sorts of things, but I still necessarily did not know. One of the things that I would say it helped me because I developed a strong sense of self and grit and how to just pressure through when things get hard. But I do recall a time, as I wrote it in my book, 2.43 The Impossible Dream, that when I first got to Auburn University as a hybrid first generation student, I was actually contemplating leaving Auburn University to attend a different school because if you don't know, most don't know, Auburn University is a predominantly white institution, and I'm coming from a primarily Black African American community. on top of my high school as well as my middle school, 7th and 8th grade school was like 99 to 100% African American. So that culture shock and the support that I thought that I would have gained like immediately on day one at Auburn, I didn't necessarily have that. So I struggled really bad until I just happened to be sitting outside of Starbucks in front of the quad, the student center. And there was an African American man who walked by and he knew my name, but he knew my name because I was a student, a part of the Provost Leadership Undergraduate Scholarship Program, short form for PLUS, at Auburn University, which is a scholarship cohort-based program where you had about 59 to 60 of incoming first years, took courses together, went through an orientation program together that was pre-arrival of their first day of school. So I kind of did the landscape, and I think he found my name and identified me based upon like being around that program. And he was like, hey, wait, how the things are going? And I'm like, you know, stranger danger. I did kind of like get to know him as being Dr. Shakir Abdullah, who I still call a mentor and a friend to this very day. He actually walked me into Starbucks and helped me order my first drink. And he was like, are you okay? And I was like, I'm gonna be honest, no. And so I talked to him about what I was going through and how difficult it was. And he literally put me in position to be involved in several student organizations to kind of find my community and home at Auburn. And then from there, it was off to the races. And honestly, without him, you know, interceding in that way at that moment, I was contemplating calling my parents and say, hey, I think I want to come back home. I want to transfer to a different school because I'm just not feeling connected that way. And I know that would have definitely changed my trajectory of life because I would never have finished Auburn. So that's one of those things that as a first generation student, I definitely resonate with the feeling of unknown, uncertainty, and not sure. But I will tell first generation students as well as low income students is find your resources on campus and identify and ask questions. Be comfortable to ask, to confide in at least one staff member or faculty member there, and they'll be able to help you put you in position where you can be the most successful.
You know, Dr. Abdullah is a good man. You know, he's been here on the show.
I've heard.
Yes, sir. Really good guy. How did your time at Auburn University shape your personal and professional trajectory?
Oh, so what's funny about this, I actually started at Auburn University as an engineering student with my first year, yes. I I was one of those kids growing up in Atlanta, Georgia, to see the Olympics, or at least to see the buildings that the Olympics that took place in Atlanta. And we stumbled across Georgia Tech's campus, and they took me into the Natarium, the swimming pool area. And as a kid, I love to swim. I love to swim now. And I was like, I want to go and live like this. I want to go and enjoy a pool like this. And I remember leaving campus and seeing that, you know, engineering, this long E word was everywhere. And I grabbed hold of that back in like maybe the second, third grade maybe. And I said, from that time up until my freshman year, I wanted to be an engineer. I had no clue what engineering was or what they actually did. I just figured I was going to be an engineer and I was going to make video games. But when I got to Auburn and I was an engineering student, it was very tough. I did well in high school, you know, chemistry and math courses and that sort of thing. However, when I got to Auburn, the classes were much different and I was not doing well academically. And I remember going to the Career Center and taking lots of assessments to figure out, wait, what did you like? You know, what is this thing that you could be good at, but also what's something you want to pursue? And I took several assessments like the focus, the type focus assessment, just different things to help me figure out life, right? And not necessarily leaning on the fact that what my parents wanted me to do or what my community back home in Montgomery applauded me and knew that I was going to be going to Auburn to become an engineer. Luckily, I recognized from the assessments and confirmed with myself, I could talk. So I was like, well, my number one was communication, public relations. I did see counselor. I also saw you can be a teacher. And I was like, I don't want to be a teacher. That's like, you know, that's something I wanted to do. But I ended up taking that information, going back home and figuring out, I'm going to try communication, public relations. I kind of like the way that looks and feels. And when I tried to get into both of those majors, they told me I couldn't double major. And I was like, well, let me go super broad and do communication, and then I'm just gonna do a minor in marketing, right? And so as I'm navigating this particular Bachelor of Arts in Communication and a minor in marketing, I was noticing that there was a lot happening in the world. You had Trayvon Martin was murdered, you had Hands Up, Don't Shoot, you had a lot of things that happened in the country that I'm a young person. I'm president of the Auburn University chapter of the NAACP, and I'm pretty vocal. I wouldn't say militant, but I was very vocal about, hey, something's going wrong here in the country. And I remember going to my now mentors, but my advisors. There were Black men and Black women like Dr. Shakir Abdullah, Dr. Jocelyn Vickers, Sharia, Dr. Holland, just all these amazing people, and saying like, I have this energy, but I want to do what you do, but I don't know how to get there. And they told me about this field of higher education administration. They said that you have to go to graduate school to earn a degree that can get you in position best forward to do what we do, because they all worked in student access, multiculturalism, diversity, equity, and inclusion success programs. And I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna go to grad school then. And it was an immediate switch. So I finished my degree with communication, but my last year, which took me 5 years to finish my bachelor's degree. So kudos to everyone to take that victory lap. So my last year, I did like everyone else did, and I applied for Auburn University's Master's of Education graduate program around November. I took I was not necessarily the richest kid in college, so I just took half of one of my checks somewhere else and didn't pay rent this time. And I took my test to take the GRE test and got it back, and kind of like a rob Peter to pay Paul situation as a struggling college student. I got my results back and I applied for the program and I got in. But also I will be remiss to say that I got in, and I feel like this is one of those nuggets I tell people all the time. You have to ask for what you want. I knew that my GPA, the way that some people would say is it wasn't the strongest. At the time, I had a 2.6 or 2.7 something GPA. And we've heard the things all the time that if you have a subpar GPA, that graduate school, a doctoral degree, or even a graduating period is not going to be on your bucket list. You're not going to be able to achieve said things because of that. Well, that wasn't true for me. So what I did was I scheduled a meeting on purpose with the chair of the Department of Education, the learning and policy that housed the higher ed administration degree for master's program. And I was like, hey, can we do a coffee chat? Because I knew I have $1 million mouthpiece. I can talk. I can get you to love me in some kind of way. And so I had this meeting with him, and I was like, yo, like, this is what I'm working with. So I got this GRE score. I have this ACT, not ACT, but the GRE score itself, this GPA. I also have this amount of extracurriculars, which I was really good in that area. And I was like, if I get one opportunity to myself up, and about maybe a month later, and interestingly enough, I was the first one out of all of my cohort, all of my friends that knew what they were doing before our last year. So I kind of gained the name of being grad school. So my friends would call me grad school. And so that's how I got into education administration.
Oh, wow. Well, congratulations to you on that. But so with this, so what made you really want to be the administrator? I know you said before, you saw some things with some of the faculty and staff, what they were doing. But what was it about what they were doing that triggered something in you that you wanted to be an administrator?
Oh, definitely. I felt like I had a student's perspective that I wanted to fix some things. I didn't know how to fix it, but when I would hear that they would say, and people would just say, you have to be in the room to make the change that you want to see. And I knew that I wasn't going to be a student forever. And I knew that in order for me to help the generation, or in that case, the students behind me, have a better experience, I needed to be there to help move the needle and move things along. Now, the people that I just named, they made their offices home for me. I would go in their offices sometimes and we would have cry sessions because I had a lot of personal things going on. And I would cry and they would coach me back up about whatever life was happening to me. And then they would send me right back at the door. And then 2 days later, I would come back and cry some more. They also had food, like they had refrigerators and they would give me candy. And they just was like really good people, you know. To this day, Dr. Jocelyn Vickers, who is considered for generations, I would say. I don't know how many years it's been. I won't age her at all, but for generations of students, she is the mom of our university. She really helped a lot of us out. I remember going in her office, and one of these things that really changed my life is I was like, Dr. Vickers, I'm really struggling financial. Like, I don't know what to do. I'm working 3 jobs, trying to figure it out. And she was like, oh, apply for food stamps. And I was like, what? How do you do that? And so she helped me apply for food stamps. That was not her job. She didn't have to do nothing like that. And I felt like if I was going to do anything in this world, I wanted to be impactful on that type of level, something real, something tangible to help people. And I knew in higher education administration, I could do that, but I wanted to do it a specific way that mirrored the way that I was treated by those staff members that I just mentioned. But I also learned, you know, what not to do. I had some administrators and faculty that I did not resonate with, that I felt like was not very safe or very welcoming to me or others. So I learned, I picked up everything to say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to improve upon it, but I'm also not going to duplicate what was done to me or done to others when I get into leadership.
Oh, wow. So what was the moment you knew higher education was your purpose?
So I went to this program called Leadership, which is a nationally recognized leadership cohort program. It's modeled where it's like housed at several universities and colleges across the country. And so my particular school, Auburn University, they house leadership on campus, where they would take about, I don't know, roughly maybe 30 to 50 students out to Rome, Georgia, to some cabins and give you a very intensive leadership, you know, development, where you was able to write out your vision, your goals, what do you see yourself being. And I remember just sitting there, and I was like, I want to be the vice president of student affairs. I don't know how to get there. I don't even know how to go about doing this thing in higher education administration. But I knew that from my vantage point, that was the top of the puzzle here to implement change. Of course, I've grown and realized that that's not necessarily the pinnacle or the route that I personally would want to take. Knowing how I am right now, maybe I will grow into that space, because I'm doing quite well in effective lives positively where I am now, where I don't necessarily have to have that particular title or that role to do that. But during leadership, I remember several staff members would come to me and we would do like intensive talking conversations, and I would never let it go. Like, this is going to be my purpose in life. This is what I wanted to do. And then shortly after that, we went back home, and there was an incident that happened on campus. I won't go into a lot of details, but I would just say students were looking up to me and other of our peers to say, what can we do to make it better? And everyone kind of looked towards me because I was really vocal on campus, and I was a part of a cohort of students that really helped Auburn University see at the time, hey, we have to do better. And seeing how the gears within an organization or institution will move, once I learned how to do that and make that make sense for my peers and just other students in general, I said, okay, I'm gonna do this, step into this field, but at the same time, I'm gonna step into it knowing how to go about doing this successfully for the benefit of the students itself.
Wow. So, you know, with that whole thing, and the group that you were with, and they said that your peers thought that you were so vocal. What did you? What were some of the things that you guys actually pitched to the university that needed to be changed or needed to make it better?
So one of the things was, we knew that the student success programs, which unfortunately they're not there now due to the current administration in the White House and their Dear Colleague letter that was created back in 2025, which we know now is not a legal standing, but a lot of colleges and universities decided when it first came out to kind of abandon the ideas and constructs of diversity, equity, and inclusion, that they just dismantled all of these things, right? So when I was a part of this group of leaders, what we did was we looked at the actual numbers, we looked at the data sets and said, hey, the students that are a part of the PLUS program, this Purpose Leadership Undergraduate Scholarship, they're graduating at a higher percentage than students that do not participate, who are first generation, low income, as well as students that may have a diverse racial background. And so in having that data set, which we work with the Office of Institutional Research to actually gather it, we got testimonials from which will be qualitative data from those students as well to say, hey, we've developed a presentation for all of these programs for PLUS. We had the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion within our College of Math and Sciences. They had a summer bridge program within our College of Engineering. They had a program called AEP, Alabama Excellence Power Program, which was very similar. We had tutoring, but funding sources for all these things. We looked at all of that data and we developed a presentation where we invited everyone to campus of who's who, and we did a town hall to say, like, look, if you double the funding for these particular programs, as well as hire an additional coordinator to help the staff that's there. Because all of these programs, they were run by either one person or one person plus an administrative assistant, which technically that one person is the brainchild of running the entire thing, right? And so when we put the data there and the numbers there, it was like, look, if you want to invest and show the improvement of this is how you can benchmark it and do it. And so once I was a part of that group of students that understood how to use data to tell a story, I knew that wherever I go institution-wise, that I was going to be able to effectively create change because I understood how the numbers work and how you could create a narrative and create an appropriate narrative to help underprivileged students get a better leg up to be successful while they're matriculating of any institution.
I am so proud of you because that's actually accomplishing a real feat. And when you accomplish something like that and you work to do to make change like that, that's got to be everlasting. Do you think that they will ever bring that program back to Auburn and reestablish where you guys left off?
I actually don't know. I think that by Auburn being in the state of Alabama and the way the government is being run, which please go out and vote today if you're able to vote. Alabama's had the primary going on, as well as several states around the country as well. So I would say that I don't know. I think that some political landscapes will have to change for those types of programs to be brought back the way that they were. However, I will say that we could still do the work, and no matter where you're located in this country, if you centralize it based upon the success of students. If you centralize it around the constructs of race and different identities, you're going to have a harder time, right? But if you centralize it around, let's just see, a specific area code or zip code within a particular area. If you centralize it around low income status or around veterans or being a first generation student, so these different things that are not viewed as a part of diversity, equity, and inclusion, because we know that there's a lens where people are working from that equates DEI with race or gender or sexuality, expression, orientation, expression. However, they're leaving out that veteran support on college universities campuses is also diversity, equity, and inclusion support. Support of first generation students falls under that as well. Low income support falls under that as well. So if we do our work from the lens of these socially accepted programs or identities, then we can still do the work. Just don't do the race thing when you know you're still going to be able to help those students that fall into the categories, especially the way that things are right now. Hopefully, with it not being a legal standard at the federal level, that colleges and universities that are also in states that do not have the banned language from it will be allowed or have the gumption, I would say, to bring those programs back because they are successful. They do change lives. They do create a softer landing pad for students to be successful while they're matriculating through their academics and socially at the time. A lot of things happen to you when you are that age that your faculty member or a particular academic component is not going to be able to solve.
So, how did your upbringing influence your passion for cultural competency and identity development?
I would say that that goes back to my father, more so than my mom. And it's not to take anything away from my mom as well, but I think identity development. I remember riding down West Fairview in Montgomery, Alabama. And if you also don't know about Montgomery, Alabama, the west side of Montgomery is really one of the poorest areas in the city. On top of that, it is the most abandoned area within the city where a lot of resources left that area and they went to the east side all the way out towards the Chantilly area. You're almost not even in Montgomery County anymore. And I remember asking my dad, like, how was life back when he was a child? He was born in 1963. And so he would have been a part of that first ilk of students that really had like integration and really racial and cultural intermingling. And he would tell me a story about how he, my Uncle Ren, who's still alive, I love him dearly, and then my Auntie Jean, which is our older sister, she passed away some years ago as well, how some white young men had ran them off the road as they was walking home from school, and they would do it repeatedly all the time. And this one time, my dad, my uncle, and some other of the neighborhood Black American kids that was their age, they didn't run anymore. They decided to fight. And that kind of silenced the whole thing. And so for me, what I took away from that, even though I heard it multiple times, 'cause I always wanted to hear that story, is at some point you have to be able to turn around and look the fear aspect of it in the eye and fight in some kind of way. I'm not saying that we should be fighting physically from what I took away from it, but I do believe that you have to opt into the game that's being played here for you to have a really strong chance when it comes down to cultural equality across the board.
Let's move over and talk a little bit about your education and scholarship. You've earned multiple graduate certificates. What drives your hunger for continuous learning?
Originally, I would say that I wanted to succeed because there's this idea, once again, that nothing good can come from Montgomery. But I also would say that I used to hear a lot growing up that, you know, my mom's name is Verlisa, my father's name is Wade. And sometimes you would hear, like, you know, those kids ain't gonna be nothing and those sorts of things. And I never wanted my mom and my dad to be shamed because I know that they really championed me to be successful. They also championed my intellect and my academics. And I didn't want people to, you know, sometimes people could throw things in your face to try to shame you in some regard. And so once I got to Auburn, I was determined. I was like, I don't care how many classes I fail, I'm not going back to Montgomery, Alabama and sit on the couch because I don't want to hear it. Not from them, but from the community that's going to be at my mom and dad, right? And so once I finished that first one, I was like, I'm going to, this second one, because that's my passion, the higher administration, I'm going to finish the second one. But once I got into the world and I recognized that not me making this construct of this thing, but people in society made it to where if you did not have a specific pedagogy or academic attainment, that you were being treated a certain kind of way in the workforce, especially within education. And I was finding myself in rooms where things were being said to me, and I couldn't tell was it because I was the youngest one in the room or because I was a Black American or what it was. And it was like, you know, I was flat out told I haven't earned the right to speak, or I have not earned the position to add to a particular program that is going to be done. Because I was, once again, I'm still having that mindset, oh, we're coming into this space together as a team, as a community, we're going to be able to build something together. But that was not the case. And so I decided to pursue a grad certificate in program evaluation because I had a fear of numbers and statistics because of my experience in engineering in undergrad. And I was like, if I'm going to pursue any further education and to beat the system that's being created here within higher ed, I'm going to have to learn how to do qualitative, quantitative assessments and building the survey design. And so I was luckily and I was afforded to be working in the state of Georgia. And if you work for the state of Georgia at the time, I still think it's the same thing as well. You could work full time at any public institution, and you could get 9 credit hours after for free for any program after you work 6 months. And so I was like, if I'm not going to take on more student loan debt. I'm just going to work within the system what I have. And I pursued that certificate. I earned a certificate, and by that time, I was like, oh, I think I'm ready. Like that fear of getting a terminal degree, like a doctorate, I was like, oh, well, this is all it is. I can do that. So I applied for several programs. One, I applied for 3 in total. The 2 I did not get into, don't know why, which is fine. But I did apply for the University of Georgia's Doctorate of Education and Learning, Leadership, and Organizational Development. And I gotta be honest, I was not sure about getting into any program at the time at all. I purposely missed my interview because fear gripped me. And so when I came back to my friend circle, they was like, oh, how's the interview? And I was like, oh, I didn't even go. But they coached me back up, and they was like, Wade, you got it. You know you can do this. And so luckily, the lady who was the administrative assistant of the program, she called me later that evening, was like, hey, Wade, sorry we missed you today. Can we reschedule? And I was, after being chewed out and coached back up from my friends, she said, I said, well, okay, I'm gonna do it. So I rescheduled the interview with her. And in a couple of days, I did the interview. I flat out told them that, hey, I didn't agree with the theory, obviously the purpose of it. I did not know that that was the theory and the model, that was the framework that was going to be used for the program. And then one of them helped write the theory. And I'm sitting here telling her in her face, this theory don't make sense. This is very difficult to grasp hold of it. And it was so funny. And so after the fact, I get this letter in the mail. And the letter was red and black and white. And I'm like, why was the UGA sending me a letter? What is going on here? Like, it's no way I got in. So I'm sitting at the mailbox, and I'm just ripping the letter open, and it said congratulations. And I was like, congratulations? How did this happen? Because the other schools, you know, they said no. So I already had chipped my confidence down enough, right? And so when I got into UGA's program, I was the youngest one in my cohort. And then once again, I'm used to taking a full load of classes. So my doctoral program was either 2 classes here or 1 class here. And if you are in graduate school, for everyone in your doctoral program, sometimes you only take 2 classes. And I'm used to taking 3 or 4 load. So I said, well, let me just maximize, because I'm one of those type of people. And so I decided to pursue a graduate certificate in nonprofit management and leadership, because that mattered to me about helping also in the nonprofit sector if I decided to say, I need to help or build something outside of the constructs of an institution. And then also too, I wanted to showcase a mastery of diversity, equity, and inclusion, which that's also one that I earned. And so I was doing all that at the same time. I was doing my doctoral program and my study, and luckily I finished all of them before, and I graduated in December 2022. That was one of the best days of my life. Even though, you know, I had already went through the actual dissertation phase, I had already did my defense, but to actually hear your name and look at your major professor and just have that moment of like, this is my feedback. So that's how my academics went.
So, how did your doctoral research shape your understanding of leadership and organizational development?
Yes, so my doctoral program was on the development of a student success program specifically for first generation students. I've always had a heart for first generation students because, like I said, I consider myself one, and I knew what I needed, which I did receive those things, but I knew that I need to build something to help. And so within my program, you had to do your study at the institution or a already established institution that you had access to. And so I was working at the University of North Georgia. I was the assistant director at the time of the multicultural student affairs, and eventually became the director of that office. And I was like, well, I can kind of build something here. I have the resources here, and I knew that there was a gap between the graduation rates for students that are not attending University of North Georgia, that are first generation students, the students that are first generation that are not in the program at all or never had any type of interventions in that way, and also to the students that are not first generation in University of North Georgia. And I was noticing that by all accounts, when I looked at the data, the students who were first generation at University of North Georgia, they all fell behind the national average of graduation and degree attainment, but also they fell below the ranking and the average of the students that were not first gen. So that created that gap in academia that you say, okay, this is the problem here. And so from there, I was like, oh, I can build something to help solve this. And I built the interventions with my action research team of about 5 or 6 practitioners on the campus. And then we built our interventions from scratch. Of course, in the middle of that, COVID-19 happened. And so my study moved from being a face-to-face intervention study to me having to recalibrate and build something that was going to be able to be housed virtually at the same time. And so that was my study. And what we learned as well that, you know, academic integration, because I use TENTO, student development and leaving model, departure model. And so what I learned is that literally the students themselves needed both academic and student integration, but the academic integration piece was much more important based upon my data set with my students that I had than the social integration. Well, we can't disregard the social part, but the academic meant a lot. So building interventions such as tutoring, mentor-based matriculation through academic programs, that sort of thing emerged, and that's what we built with the program itself, and we called it Trailblazers, the Trailblazers program.
I got to tell you, and for those of you that are watching, I will tell you that Dr. Manora's dissertation was definitely top notch, and you know, and I, I know you were going to talk about that. I was going to talk about that later, but I want to ask you now, because in that concept of, you know, of the writing of that paper, because it was so profound, but it was so connected. And the way it connected, as I told you about how I connected that, I want you, if you could tell our audience, what was your overall thought process when you began that process to when you ended it? And how are you enacting that now?
My overall thought process from the very beginning is I can do anything. Literally, that's what it was. I think I had very few days in the course of 4 years. I had very few days where I said I can't do this. I did suffer through writer's block and also the imposter syndrome as being the youngest one in my cohort. But I think this also was mixed with we were shut in. We couldn't really go anywhere. So my social interactions was kind of low. And so I did kind of sometimes sit on the sofa and say, what am I doing? I'm gonna finish this, but this is a lot. This is very isolating. No one told me how hard this is gonna be. And but so I knew going forward, I said, I'm going to do this. I knew I was going to deal with something with first generation students. It didn't matter what it was. I was going to create something around that. I knew that going into it. I also knew that in order for me to finish, I could not look towards the left or the right to see what other people were doing or not doing. If part of my cohort, I love my cohort, I love them to pieces. We still talk to this very day, but I knew that I couldn't allow myself to hear like negative talk or negative speak or fall into the trap of not feeling like you're not going to do it. And I just would tell myself every day I could. In terms of the project, the program itself, of course, when we think of these ideas, I was really thinking massively the biggest solution possible. But as I'm maneuvering through it, I was like, oh, this was quite simple if I made the interventions like smaller and actually impactful, opposed to this ginormous type of intervention that has all these pieces to it, which could sometimes never be done, right? And so I feel like when you start a study of this caliber, you think that you're going to go into it knowing that you're going to change the world. And then when you really get to the end, it's like, oh, I actually changed a system which is affecting this area, which had nothing to do with the world, or I'm affecting change where I can actually see it impacting and changing someone's life.
What does it mean to you to be a lifelong learner?
It means that even if I'm not in an academic program of some sort, it means that I'm going to pick up a book. I want to pick up an article. I'm going to research something. That's something that I stand by, especially on social media with everything going on now, is I may see something on social media and I'm the type that's going to go and look up who wrote it, figure out if they have an objective or a subjective point of view, what was the backing, financial backing of the person, because that could probably influence what they said, and also just figure out like all the nuts and bolts of what information I'm receiving. And I feel like to me, that is a part of being a lifelong learner. I was just talking to my sister the other day that I don't think I'm completely done with school. I think I maybe completed my formal academic education part of it. But I'm still going to be learning like different things and different trades and different ideas along the way. One thing I'm also learning right now is I'm learning, what's this the newest thing I learned? Oh, learning how to utilize AI. You know, that's something that's a little bit scary, not really scary in terms of the impact, you know, but it's more so like it's a new thing that all institutions and all companies are kind of gravitating towards. And so I still have my personal and moral beliefs when it comes down to AI, but at the same time, I cannot not understand that this thing exists over here. So I still should be able to learn it so I can be well informed along the way.
So, how do you translate academic theory into real world practice?
So what I decided to do is I look at the theory for one. I read through it, and what people kind of get tripped up on is that they focus on the theory part and they don't look at the constructs. So the constructs are these 3 or 4 little bullet points underneath that really impact or inform what the theory is. And so once you understand that the theory is one part, but these other pieces underneath it, that is where your interventions come from. This is where your actual implementation phase could be developed and come from. And so what I do is I look at those constructs and then I try to apply them based on what makes sense and where they could fit to. And also, every theory doesn't make sense, right? So there's a theory that I love called other mothering. I'm kind of blanking on the woman who created it, and it's basically a theory based around Black women in higher education or mentorship capacities, where they take on the role of being a maternal figure, right? Where you have an entire wraparound support system. And so, because that theory is baked into being for Black women, as well as being a mothering, nurturing roles in the setting of education settings, that is an amazing theory. But that theory also cannot be stretched and looked at from the vantage point of other mothering in a political landscape. Like you would have to find a theory that at least the constructs could match, or at least could go across the board and be easily translatable. Or you're gonna have to probably possibly find, you know, some data or articles out there that could kind of help you parse through of where we can apply these different things from. Because if you don't, you could kind of run into the issue of the theory being a mismatch.
What advice would you give to students pursuing advanced degrees while balancing life responsibilities?
I would say get yourself a good therapist. I had a therapist. He helped me a lot. I met with him once a week because it was so much going on. It was life. I was working full time. All these different identities and just navigating like life. Like life was life me, and it had nothing to do with my academics component. But adding that on, I needed help to ground myself. And once I got those tools, I realized that one of the things that helped me is I like to write for leisure. I like to read for leisure. I like to go out and walk. So I would say anyone that's interested in pursuing a terminal degree, as well as balancing the life aspects of it, you have to pick a study that you are interested in for one. Because if you pick a subject of your study that you don't like, you're not going to do well on it. You're going to lose interest, and you're going to get really fatigued by even reading the information about it. The other thing is you really have to do a good job of figuring out what you like and what you don't like on a personal level, like what will bring you joy, and find moments and opportunities to do that. Because once again, if you don't, you run the risk of burning out and having a very unbalanced life where once again you're going to run into that fatigue setting where you're not going to want to do it or complete it and going to lose your motivation. On day one, I also recommend too writing down or just putting affirmation to say, what is my intrinsic motivation? What is something that's going to motivate me to keep it close to my heart as I'm going through whatever tough moments are coming? That's going to help me like refocus and recenter. For me, in the very beginning, I would say I want my parents to be proud of me. And then that merged into my Black American male students. I told them that I was getting my terminal degree, and they were like asking me questions. Did you read something tonight, or like the night before, or can I read your data? And I was like, why do you want to read this? But I felt like they gravitated towards me, and they wanted to know. They wanted to. I feel like they felt inspired by me in some kind of way. So that helped add to my personal motivation to say, I'm going to finish. If it's not for myself, I'm going to finish for my students. And what's also the funny part about it is a lot of my students that grabbed hold to me during that time, we still talk today. And then they have went on and pursued their extra degrees, their master's degree, and they invited me to their defenses. And they would call me out and say, "Hey, my mentor is here in the audience or on the Zoom call, Dr. Manora. Without him, I wouldn't be." And it's like, things like that I know that what this young man has been through, and to see him stand before a panel and give his own research where he was contemplating dropping out of school, I look at it just like a way of paying it forward, because I know, once again, going back to Dr. Shakir, that Black male on campus, without him, I don't know what would happen for me. So I'm like, I want to continue to pay it forward as long as I'm in the field.
Let's talk a little bit about the Manora Method Consulting LLC. What inspired you to create the Manora Method Consulting LLC?
So I was noticing that I was always being pulled or asked or requested to do things such as help people with career development, i.e. resume support, interviewing support. I was also pulled to do keynote speakerships, pulled to help people understand the ideals and concepts of diversity, equity, and inclusion with various levels. I also was asked to do some team leadership development, i.e. summer leadership retreat programs. And I was like, I could do something with this, right? Because this is also around the time where I was noticing that across the board, what I do and what I give to college campuses is slowly being erased off of campus, meaning in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion-backed programs. And I said to myself, if I have to change the way that I do my work from the 9 to 5 day, right, then I'm still going to do my work outside of that, which kind of motivated me to build the Manora Method Consulting LLC, because all those things I just mentioned, I've built that. And I also at the same time became an author. So I went ahead and wrote an autobiography of my undergraduate experience, Trials and Tribulations, which is called 2.43 The Impossible Dream, which kind of leads you to all the things that happened in my life during my undergraduate experience. And I also recently published 2 children's books, Mom Can I and Dad Can I, which is following, a miniature version of myself, asking my parents like, hey, can I, dog walk 9 dogs, right? And so of course the older the story is, and my mom was like, you can do anything. So that was the whole thing of speaking positive, speaking to your children, because they can grab hold of anything. And so for me, all of those things led me to want to create something, because I understood how to build it in terms of organizational structures with using the internet and Google and the folders, and I did that part. But I also had to lean on other people, like my cousin, Bernicia Chambers. She's a nurse practitioner doing an amazing job. She and I are exactly maybe 11 months apart, and she's a business owner. So I came to her and I was like, hey, I really want to do something, but I don't know how to do it. And so she was like, well, you need the EIN number, you need the name, you need a business plan. And I was like, oh, I can do that. So I would say to people as well, even if you have a terminal degree, if you don't have a terminal degree, if you just have an idea, there's power in asking people or reaching out to people because they could have the knowledge to help you. She also helped me like get my business finance, like banking and everything. And it's like, but I would have never known that because my world is baked into education. I don't have a business background. So leaning on someone else to help inform me, it was like, oh, this is where I can do this. And so that, all of those things, and knowing that I want to implement change, and the change I want to do is on the personal level. I want people to know that they could better themselves, but they may not know how, or they may not be inspired because the situation could look so bleak. And I want people to look at me from Montgomery, Alabama, which people probably view in a negative light, and look at my story of, you know, having a subpar GPA and say, oh, if he could do it, maybe I could take some of the pathways that he did and bridge it with my own and get to that landing pad of success, of my own success that I have created for myself.
So the method and the concept that you use for the Manora method consulting, how did you decide how you would conceptually build your consulting firm to make it as successful as it is today? What were some of those things that you wanted to implement into it in order to build it out?
Yeah, definitely. So what happened was my students coined that term, the Manora method, right? And so they would tell other administrators or faculty members or advisors that was like, Dean Wade does it like this, or they were just, you know, kind of like joking with it, but sometimes it would be serious and was like, because the level of care and the level of detail that I have with my students, they would say, nobody does it like Dean Wade or Dr. Wade. And so they was like, he got the Manora method coined. And I was like, I can do something with that. And so that is where the idea of it came from. And I thank them because they really helped tap into something that I kind of didn't know what it was. But I would just say, I thank God, I thank my family for saying, like, you have something, but you just run with it. And that was where I grabbed a hold of it. I just ran with it and created it. And so I know what I can give to the world as someone who is a previous career counselor at one of the best institutions in the country, is that I have a career development acumen that a lot of people where I'm from don't know or don't have access to career development education in terms of resume, cover letter, learning how to do interviews, learning how to do netiquette, you know, doing different things that can get you up the ladder. And because there is an inadequate outreach to my communities in that regard where I'm from, or communities similar to mine, I wanted to build something that was accessible, also within the e-module where people could always go back and read it and listen to it over a presentation style, but also provide them with documents. In the same regard, I have a solid background in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and my approach with that is there needs to be a tiered approach to it. So you can have your beginner, your intermediate, and your advanced approach to DEI because some constructs are very, you know, heavy and they can be very difficult to deal with. And so what I built is I looked at what the patterns are from young adults or rest in the country and developed, you know, the e-models based around those things. Additionally, I do team leadership development programs for small to medium teams, which is informed by my education, but also what I love to do. I was able to build a leadership retreat component with my with an emerging 100 of South Metro in Atlanta, Georgia, where a lot of different fun activities I created for that group, but I also had things that tied back to their mission, their goals, their values, and had them do exercises where we built, I should say, a solid foundation of what it means to be a collective going towards a united front. And so I have that skill set, and I said, I could work with these things. I need to go ahead and build these things out and offer them, which I'm doing a really, really good job in doing that. And then, of course, I understand that I've been tapped several times to be like kind of a speaker of some regard, whether it's organizations or institutions. And I said, I want to offer that as well. I have a conversation pieces that could be helpful to different communities. And so all of those things, of course, the author coming on the latter end is what led me to build the platform that I have right now.
What core values guide your consulting practice?
So I have three. But my first core goal value, which is the main thing, is I'm focusing on accessibility. So my prices are adjusted to the community that I'm looking to reach out to and to serve. It's going to make sense. And also, if you email me, you reach out to me and say, hey, and I'm saying this on record, Dr. Manora, I don't have $20 for the module, but I have 10 or I have $5. Or I've done this literally this past couple of days. Someone reached out to me from Ghana and they're interested in higher education. And I was like, hey, I don't do cover letter or I don't do resume cover letter like just at the leisure anymore. However, what I will do, if you send me your letter of intent, if you send me these other documents, I will definitely review them and give you 2 rounds of, some things that you may want to edit to make your things better, right? And so I try to make myself accessible because I know what it feels like where you're trying to climb up this ladder that you don't have, you may not know the skills or the tools to get to that point. And because it could be a financial limitation or just an access limitation, I wanted my thing that I was going to build to be accessible, especially on the financial front to others. Because I feel like when you've been blessed personally, for me, I feel like I've been blessed. And just full stop with that, is that when you've been blessed, you know that you didn't kind of get to this place or position that you're at by yourself or on your own. Like someone reached back to help you, and I don't mind being that person that can reach back and help other people. The other 2 goals, or I would say values that I have for myself, right, is I am actually a people-centered person. So I wanted what I provide for others is going to be the same high-quality value that I would be looking for if I was on the other receiving end of getting some help or support. So I'm going to take my time. I'm going to be responsive to the emails. I'm going to give a service as if it's going to be high quality every single time because that's important to me. I feel like when people take their time to pay for anything or just to reach out to you in any capacity, that it's your due diligence to also treat them the way that you would want someone to treat you or your loved one on the other side. And then the third thing that I would say too is I want it to be fun. I wanted it to be not stuffy. I care not about cutting communities off, right? I feel like a lot of times in spaces that I've created, we've developed this kind of ecosystem where communities of lower financial strata, or what people would sometimes say like the throwaways or the never gonna have or the never gonna be's, they kind of don't know where to go or where to land. And I wanted my space that I built is like, hey, you're welcome here. And I'm gonna help you not change who you are, but I'm gonna help you sharpen what you have to get you to where you wanna go, right? So also too, I don't code switch. So with the accent that you hear, that's Montgomery, Alabama, and it's just gonna be what it is. Like I don't care. so I believe in just being your authentic self, and so that is the through line of all of this. So if you come to me and you feel like I'm not polished, I wasn't polished then. I'm not polished now, and I don't subscribe to want to be the idea of what people would say is considered polished. Because polish could come across as being pretentious, snobbish, standoffish in some kind of way, and you don't have to be that way. That's a deliberate choice. That's a choice. And when you do that, and when you do have positions of power or degree attainment or a doctorate in this case, what you're doing when you do that, you're basically helping confirm a narrative that's not true. And so I'm very purposeful to say, hey, I'm Dr. Wade, I'm Dr. Manora, whatever iteration you want to go. But I'm not going to look down on you for what you don't have, either educational wise or your financial attainment, because I think that's lame. I think that's whack. I think that's not something you should ever do because you just got the thing yourself. So why would you turn around and look down on others for what they have not achieved thus far?
I got to tell you, I love the way you got the values and the principles set in place as you do your consulting. And I love the way that you're reaching out and how you actually cater to particular communities. That means a whole lot, from my perspective, because I think so many communities are being taken advantage of, to where people go in and say, "Oh, we're going to do this, that, and the other," and they charge these people all these astronomical prices and just break the entire household. And
Yeah.
I really don't think that that's necessary.
It's not.
I really
I
appreciate
view it as not helpful. I feel like you're creating an impediment for people because they're going to see the access that you have, and because of the financial constraints with it, they're not going to pursue it, right? And so if they're not going to pursue it, if you have all the knowledge or access, you're kind of being a gatekeeper in that regard. I'm not saying you should work for free. I'm not saying that, but I do think that we should be measurable in what we do, especially when we have access and degree attainment. There's no reason why that we should be, and this is not to shade anyone at all, but to do sessions that are $350 or $500 for an hour. Why would you want to? Why would you do that? Now, I really should pay for your time, but I think you should also be reasonable and understand charging a Fortune 500, 400 company $10,000 for an hour, 2 hour talk is quite different than charging a nonprofit for the betterment of 12 or 6 to 12-year-olds of them being inspired by Career Day, right? So one of these things, they're much different in who's being impacted. So I would never say you should charge me. I should charge you 10,000 because I charged over here 10,000. It doesn't. You're not doing the work in that regard. You're causing an issue.
Let's go over to your to this one thing that you mentioned throughout the show. Let's talk about your work as a DEI facilitator.
Mm-hmm.
And tell us, what does DEI mean to you beyond the buzzwords?
So I like to start this particular topic off simply by bringing clarity to it, because I've heard DEI pulled together for quite some time, but I'm like, these two things, this is not one thing, right? These are three different specific categories and nouns, right? Diversity is simply the presence of difference within a space, right? So on the Zoom, on the call here, we're considered diverse. You know, we have different demographics, different regionals that are present within here. You and I may share the same ethnic and racial background, but we still are considered diverse along different lines, right? And diversity also, when you place it on a plane from like left, like an even playing field, some things are considered low diversity and others are considered high diversity. So low diversity could be the variations of eye color within a given setting or a community or a team, right? So the difference of eye colors, the variation of eye colors, is not necessarily going to break the bank when it comes down to making the dynamic of the space that it is different, right? But on high diversity, these are things such as race, ethnicity, language, sexual orientation, expression, identity, where these constructs over here, these social constructs over here, could inform and make the difference in how people show up, but also the outcome of the group, right? So in terms of inclusion, that is simply the welcoming feeling that one would have in a given setting of a team or a community. So it's like, how am I showing up in said space? Do I feel comfortable being my most authentic self? That is what inclusion means. And in terms of equity, equity is all about understanding the barriers to entry and removing the barriers of entries where everyone will still have the same access to get to the end result, right? And so I like to tell this, quick story. When I think about DEI, I use it, diversity and inclusion, I use it for myself, right? So I'm born and raised south side of Montgomery, Alabama. Went to Peter Crump Elementary School. I went to Bear Exploration Center, which is a magnet school. Then I went to Ware's Ferry Elementary School, which is a public school. I went to Resurrection Catholic School for my 7th and 8th grade. And so that's a Catholic private school. Then I went to St. Jude Educational Institute from 9th through 12th. So when I was at in those areas, we have like zoning, especially within the public schools, as an example people could understand, right? So within your zoning, you're zoned based upon the zip code that your living in. So it could be like 36117, 12925, whatever that 5-digit code is. Well, your zone is informed by your local government as well as your tax dollars and your home value, right? And so in high value home occupancy locations, your tax rates and what you can contribute is much higher. And so all of the funds will go to the schools that are within that area. But if you're in a low income community, then the funds that will be pulled to go into those public schools is quite different and it's low, right? So my experience is I was always in communities where it is the low to high. I was never in, sorry, low to medium. I was never in an affluent educational system where things such as Mu Alpha Theta Honor Society or all these different types of things that we see on scholarship and admissions programs, applications to go to college, we didn't have that in my schools at all. We still had very antiquated older books, our desk was older, and we still had a great time. But there's a difference, and we used to go to the affluent schools to play sports with them or just kind of to see how they were living, right? And they had like the best of the best. And so now we're all being asked to take the same standardized test, and we're also being asked to apply the same way to go to college or grad school or whatever it is. But as you're matriculating from K, first, second, third, all the way to the 12th grade, there's still a gap that naturally exists due to the lack of resources, which is based upon income. So equity, an example of equity is simply going to be building a bridge program from high school students who want to attend college, who got in. And so now that 2 week, potentially month or 6 weeks of them going to the college itself and take kind of like 1 or 2 mini courses there, getting like how to college programming like financial aid, learning about time management, all those sorts of things. That's what equity is. I'm not taking away from the haves or the people that already got it. What I'm doing is I'm closing the gap between those who do not have with those that do have to give everybody kind of a good starting place, right? Or at least I'm going to say illusion of the good starting place, but to close it up just enough to where those who come from a disenfranchised community or a background or funding source could at least have the skills to matriculate properly and get to the end result, which is graduation. That is all equity is. I don't know how these people got that confused, but that's an example of what equity is.
So look, let me ask you this, because I love the way you broke that down. But I want to ask you about that bridge program. Tell us, what would that look like if one was created? What would that look like?
So what that would look like is a 6 weeks over the summer. So it will start probably in the beginning of July. So the students that graduated high school, they will already be admitted into the college or to the university themselves. They would move in to a 6 weeks residential hall community. We would have student leaders on each floor, the same way as if you moved into college on day one at the standard orientation level. Your first year, you would literally move in. We would have people on the hall. It would look like also me working with the faculty members, where you could have a intro to English composition course, also an a math course, which would be college algebra with trig, or something. Once again, we gotta look at the gap between the haves and the have-nots. And so you're gonna take 2 courses from actual faculty members, right? They're gonna be giving you assignments and homework and the whole deal. We're also gonna be doing every 2 days, we would have a college life skills program for about an hour or 2, right? And so it would be, once again, a session about time management, a session about how to talk to your professors, a session about filling out FAFSA. And we will also have a round table where all of the different student support programs and offices and centers, such as financial aid, international office, multicultural office, the advising office, all these different components will be pulled together in one area. And so now the students who don't know how to navigate college already, they're getting, okay, I know where to find global engagement if I want to pursue going to do study abroad. And that's simply within the data. You can find that data on Google Scholar or anything like that, that with these programs like that, they are successful. They really help the students graduate. And so that is one way. Of course, the students are going to party. You know, they have to get the social scene out of it, right? And you know, this is giving them the resources. They're going to get up and go to class. They're going to be colleging pre-college. And then also too, you can work out a deal, which I have seen this run successfully, that students that got A in their English or their math course or whatever the intro course that they took, it counted as academic credit for them with their going into their freshman year. So now they're going into their freshman year already finishing their English composition as well as their math course.
Wow. So, how do you navigate resistance to DEI?
I navigated me, so I'm gonna take this two different ways. So I'm gonna do the institutional route, and then I'm also going to do it within like the community, individual level outside of institution. So me navigating the institutional pushbacks that could come, and I'm also not speaking for my current employer in this regard, right? So what I've seen across the field is that there's been kind of like a slice of the head in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. And so as I mentioned earlier, what I am agreeing to is that we have to do better in terms of the way that our programs look and feel, and that we're making sure that they're welcoming to all, right? And so what we have to do, no matter what, is make sure that the message is kind of a one band, one sound, and also as in truth is that it's welcoming to everyone. So if you want to learn about understanding about colorism, or if you want to learn about equity, what does that look like? Diversity, what does that look like? Inclusion, what does that look like? All these different constructs that fall under power and privilege, bias, implicit, explicit bias, all these things are back within the academic studies as well. If you want to learn about this, all those things, we could do that, right? But we also have to make sure that it's educative and not done in a way that could feel punitive by any regard, because legally we're not allowed to do that. But I also would say too, it's always been illegal to be discriminatory in that regard anyway. So having this extra thing there is kind of like, why is this a thing now, right? I know why, but I feel like it's just to make sense, right? So that's one regard. But so the pushback in that regard is reframe it to where it is inclusive of all and making sure that it remains inclusive of all, opposed to being exclusionary in any sense of the word. One of the things that I tell my student leaders and my student organization leaders as well is that make sure that your space centers you in your community, but also make sure that you're not being exclusionary. So make sure that it's still welcome to everyone to attend, but I also tell people as well, make sure that if you do attend these organizational meetings or activities or programs, that you're also in a space of willing to learn and engage in an educative format and a social format, and not be a disruptor for whatever the community space is being developed. And I have not run into any problems with doing that, right? And so that is one way that I feel like I've dealt with any institutional pushback, but I've also been very blessed to be at places where when it was starting to happen, I had left at one institution at that point, because it just was a difference of like me seeing the landscape was about to change and not being wanted to be caught up into that. And you know, I have landed into an amazing spot where I don't have institutional pushback. But what I will say to others that may be navigating that type of pushback is to find out how you could fold in education and academics into all of this, because it's literally right there. But if you stop at the social piece, that's where you may run into trouble. On the personal level, I make sure that I communicate with people to where they could understand. Like, if you're talking to you right now, you're not going to get like the educative side of me if you just meet me on the street somewhere. Like, you're just gonna get a normal speak. And I think one of the things that has been a little bit of failure of people who academically trained or have a specific academic pedagogy is that we do a lot of communication that is above people's heads. And this is not to call people ignorant or unknowledgeable in that regard, but if you're not speaking normal, no one's gonna understand what you're talking about. So just be normal. You don't have to be up here. And I don't thrive well in those spaces anyway. So I will quickly tell people, you don't have to switch up your your regular speak to communicate with me. You can just be normal. I don't require that. And so I make sure that if people have questions about, well, I don't understand why this is happening. And I would say, well, back in this time, the Daughters of the Confederacy decided to change the way that we wrote down history, and that has informed McGraw-Hill in our textbooks. So I can give you the history side, and we can just have a conversation about why some things are happening the way they are right now.
Well, you know what? I got to tell you this because I think when we look at what's happening in today's times, especially when we're talking about DEI and other programs that have been, that are that contribute majorly to, like civil rights and so forth. And when we think about breaking down DEI and a lot of, especially educational programs, breaking them all down, and they're breaking them all down to dispense them in situations like that for what you do with your consultancy. And there may be other doctors that are in like some similar areas of doing some of the work that you do. What are some of the suggestions that you can put out to the audience right now? Some things that maybe they can do to help contribute to reinstitutionalizing programs that have been disrupted.
So what I would tell people as well, so use the internet for its best tool, right? So you want to look for these specific people. You want to look for the contact information of the university president, the vice president of student affairs, the deans of students. You also want to be able to formulate your emails and your contact in a way where you're able to speak directly to the hurt, harm, and the disenfranchisement that happens in these spaces. Also, it formulates in a way in terms of academic attainment and community success. You don't want to fold in a lot of the triggering language that they're looking for to respond to, such as your race, your ethnicity, your low income status, those sorts of things, sexual orientation, expression, identity, even though we know these are still paramount issues that we're having. However, those particular names and titles I just mentioned now, they're not responding to those because they're still going in thinking that this is, taboo areas for us to go into because of what's happening now in the country. So you want to reach out to them. You also want to use your alumni resources as well at these institutions, even also in corporate as well. Reach out to the alums, utilize them and say, hey, would you feel empowered or encouraged to write a letter saying that you support this? And then once you get a good amount of, letters and communication going, set up a meeting with these people and with the communities as well to say, hey, the same way that I mentioned that I was a part of, I'm not going to compare myself to, I did not lead that thing that happened at our university. I was a part of the group. So I want to make sure everyone knows that too. So you want to make sure you're building like camaraderie where it's not just you, it's various people to say, hey, this is the issue that we see creeping back up and happening. This is the gap here. We could solve this by the re-implementation and institution of said programs that already existed, right? And even if we don't bring them back in the same form and fashion of which they were, what we still could do is do better than what we're doing now, which could lead to X, Y, and Z. So if you frame it that way, that could be extremely helpful. And you can also, have them say, reach out to diversity, equity, and inclusion consultants that work at institutional levels to help them rebuild what was lost and under a framework that will do the work still, but also do it successful without any hiccups from the federal government at this point.
So this, I know we're time is like gotten away from us because this is totally excellent. But let me ask you this one last question because we got to have you back. What is the most rewarding part of facilitating DEI learning?
The most rewarding part is having people come into the session being closed off in the beginning, or having an idea or a perception about what they're probably going to listen and hear in the session. And this is when I actually fold in my personality. I definitely understand that I have a magnetic personality. I'm able to talk. I'm able to communicate and connect with others. My mom said, you know, you can sell salt to a slug. I have $1 billion mouthpiece. I can definitely reel people in. My personality is there. But what I love is seeing the light bulbs go off and the people that walked in closed off, and then for them to come after the session, it was like, you know, this opened my eyes. And that open my eyes part for me is great because I know that they're probably going to go back to their community or to their safe space, i.e. their home, their bedroom, wherever they're located at, and say, oh, I want to research this. I want to learn more about this. I heard this last week or I heard this today. Let me research and figure out what could I add to. Because in my mind is, I'm not trying to convince you of anything. I'm trying to open you up to a world where you can learn and add to your tool belt of what you already have of like a worldview. I don't want to replace your worldview. I want you to add to your worldview and hopefully emerge into a new, fully formed worldview. So you can still maintain your belief system, but at least you'll get the information from the other side or the other education to it to add to it, right? I'm not trying to convert you from liberalism or conservatism or whatever people's worldviews are, pragmatic, none of those things, right? I'm just trying to say, hey, look, this is an academic theory. This is an academic pedagogy and framework. These are the constructs. This is how we can maneuver to better serve everyone within the collective, no matter what your demographics are. And this is how we can do it. Now, hopefully they're able to take, you know, these things and go back to their spaces and, you know, learn from it. And I like that. I like when people come and say, oh, thank you for that. Now, I love when people that say, you know, I actually changed my mind on certain things. I love that too. But I just love the fact that I was able to say something to spark your interest that you're going to take back and say, I'm going to do some research on that. I like that.
So I hope, is it possible we can have you back on the show again?
Yeah, definitely. I'll come back. Let me know whenever you want to do it. And I really enjoyed myself talking. I don't get a chance. Well, I love doing myself talking, but I don't get a chance to talk like this very often about myself and express. So I definitely appreciate the platform and you being so hospitable and having me on, and the engagement throughout the entire process has been very professional and amazing.
So, in closing, what are some words of wisdom and encouragement you'd like to leave for our audience? Tell them how they can connect with you via social media, your websites, all of those good things.
I would say, to quote, you know, Mary J. Blige, if you look at my life and see what I see, but no, seriously, I would say the word no means reroute. A lot of times throughout my life or your life, right? You're going to hear the word no, but that doesn't mean that you have failed, you've done anything wrong. It just means that there are several other routes for you to get to your end result. So if you need that, make sure you remember that going forward. I know for me personally, when I got that first jarring D on my transcript for my first grade in engineering program, and it was very shocking to me to get that first D. And I was like, I can do better. I got to do something. So they just made me reroute into a different pathway, not to quit engineering, but it made me recognize that I don't think I like engineering the way that I thought I did. And so, and then also with my GPA and finishing up in undergrad, and I was like, I've heard that you're not going to be able to go to graduate school because you don't have a 3.0 or higher, but I didn't allow that narrative that exists to determine for myself that I couldn't and I won't be able to do it. So I just decided to reroute. And my route was, I'm going to talk to the person directly, let them get a chance to know me, say this is what I have, this is what I can contribute. With an opportunity, I will definitely show myself better. And I will say too, I ended up being granted the, how do I want to phrase this too, the College of Education Graduate Student of the Year after being accepted into the program by that one conversation. So I held true to my word and was also recognized for it too. So that's what I would say. I would say people can find me on Instagram at Dr. or Dr. Underscore Wade, WADE 91. So that's Dr. Underscore Wade 91. You can also find me on www.wademenorajr.com. That's where all of my business acumen is as well. And of course, on LinkedIn, if you just search Dr. Wade Manora Jr., send me a request. I get a lot of requests on there as well. I definitely apply, accept, and then you'll get a message from me kind of like automatically. And a lot of people just shoot the breeze with me and want to have a good conversation. So I'm very open if you're interested in higher education administration as a whole, but specifically if you're interested in higher administration in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion, student success, multiculturalism, interculturalism, those sorts of programs, feel free to email me directly, and I would love to be able to help you get to the place of where you want to go within the field.
So before I close, I have a closing monologue. Do you have a few minutes after I close the show?
I'm sorry, what did you say? You kind of blanked out, sorry.
Do you have a few minutes after I close the show?
Yes, I do, yes.
So for those of you that are watching on all of our channels, especially our YouTube channels, if you have not yet subscribed and enabled all notifications, I ask if you would please support us by subscribing to our channels and getting the shows live when they take place, but also being able to go back and watch all of the content and watch all of the great work that our leaders that have come here are leaving, you know, as an educational perspective to help each and every last one of you. So in closing, tonight we witnessed the journey of a man who embodies the spirit of progress, a leader shaped by history, driven by purpose, and committed to elevating others. Dr. Wade Manora Jr. reminds us that education is not just a pathway, it is a responsibility. Leadership is not a title, it is a calling. And service is not an obligation, it is a legacy. From Montgomery to academy, from the classroom of the boardroom, from community service to national recognition, Dr. Manora continues to push forward, not only for himself, but for every student, every leader, and every community he touches. May his story inspire us to learn more, lead better, and love deeper. This has been America in Black and White. I'm your host, Charles Zachary King. Good night, and keep pushing forward. Thank you all, and we will see you tomorrow night.